Tell him about the time we faced.
All right. Well, as I remember.
At Avenger headquarters.
Because united, the Avengers are strong.
Welcome to the Marvel Evolution Show with myself, Andy Stead.
And I'm Jarian Gibson.
And I'm Alex Stroud.
And we are being joined today by a special guest. We've got Shawn Martinbrough with us. How are you doing, Shawn?
Oh, very good, guys. Thanks for having me. This is really, really cool.
You're very welcome, Shawn. You're very welcome. We'll get stuck into talking to you and what you're about and where you're from and all the things that you stand for very, very soon. But Alex, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Had a good week?
Yeah, it felt like it just drug on forever, but, I'm glad it's the weekend, so.
And we're here doing what we love doing.
Definitely.
Excellent. Jarian, how are you?
Good. Yeah, not as busy of a week as last week, so no travel, home, just doing everything usual, so.
Yeah, you was on a mammoth work journey last week, weren't you?
Yep. Big product launch, so I'm glad that's over.
Nice. Back to normality now, yeah?
Sort of.
Excellent. Yeah, so have we been up to anything interested in the Marvel world? I've started reading, well, as you know, because after my confession last week, which caused carnage on the group, to be totally honest, carnage. So for Shawn, for your sake, and for anybody that's watching or listening, I confess to not having watched season 3 of Daredevil on Netflix, and it caused carnage. To be totally honest, it was chaotic.
If I would have had heat vision, I would have cut you in half probably at that point. Like, are you serious?
You're right.
Yeah.
A friend of mine once said it was a stare that could melt cheese.
Well, should we end the interview now? Because Andy, I'm kind of with you. I did not see the first.
Oh no!
Let's cut them two off, and we'll just.
It just, just got away from me because it just hit me at a time where I was just really busy, and there were so many things just dropping in streaming and TV and film. I just forgot about it. I literally had to. I broke down and wrote a list of things I got to watch and put it in front of my television. It
is a little bit like that, isn't it? And it's even worse now. There's so much.
Oh yeah.
Now. You've not just got one company doing that. You've got multiple companies over multiple different shows. But anyway, so having said that, I'd already started to rewatch the Netflix stuff before I made that statement last week. So this isn't a knee-jerk reaction. I actually was already doing this. But I'm through season 1 of Daredevil. Again, I have watched that. I think it's like the 3rd time I've watched season 1 of Daredevil. But it just reminds me how good that actually was. That was such a good show. It really was. That first season, it reminds me of The Wire, but with superheroes.
That's good comparison.
It was really very much like that, especially the political aspect of it as well. Really interesting, which got me thinking. And I think, Jarian, you've said it, haven't you, about Wilson Fisk and whether we're going to go down, especially in Born Again with Daredevil, whether we're going to go down the route of him being mayor.
Yep.
So I thought I'd pick up the Devil's Reign run. So I picked up the Devil's Reign run. So I started reading the first couple of issues of that, which is I'm really enjoying because, again, that's got all the things that I really like about a story. That sort of little bit of political jostling, I guess, for places. Luke Cage tries to go up against Wilson Fisk as mayor of New York. And then obviously there's this sort of clandestine hero action that's going on. And Fisk trying to be a good guy, but he's actually, well, no, he's not trying to be a good guy. He's trying to look like a good guy, but he's actually a bad guy. All the stuff that I really love. So I'm really enjoying Devil's Reign. It's a really good read so far, but I'm only a couple of issues in. But I'd recommend it from what I've read so far. So that's been really good. And then what else was I doing the other day? I did something else in regards. Oh no, sorry, I didn't do anything else in regards to Marvel. I just thought I'd bring up Paul Edwards, who we had on from a few weeks earlier this year, actually, wasn't it? From DC World for our DC takeover. He actually went to the UK premiere of Black Adam and met Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah, I saw his Instagram post. That was pretty cool looking.
Yeah, so jealous of him because I think he also did like an interview with a couple of people as well. Yep. I watched those as well, so very awesome.
Yeah. I saw him yesterday, so I went to his shop. His shop's in my town. So, Shawn, just for a bit of background, Paul, he runs a website called DC World, all to do with DC Comics, and he writes blogs and things like that. And he's also runs a small shop in my town, selling Funko Pops and other merchandise. But he's been in a position where he's been able to do interviews with lots of DC people, whether that be he was at the Gotham Knights game launch the other day, which is really cool. But also obviously lots of movie and TV stuff. And he went to the UK premiere of Black Adam and was in the same room as Dwayne Rock Johnson and shook his hand and all that. And I saw him yesterday and I said, "How you doing, Paul?" All right? And he said, "Yeah, I'm just buzzing, absolutely buzzing." I said, "How is it to be back amongst us simpletons, not mixing with this riffraff rather than sort of with the Rock?" And he was like, "Yeah," he said it was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, what a fantastic opportunity. Yeah, brilliant. And he said it was great, and he really enjoyed the film as well. Yeah, that was good. Having that sort of connection between us and Paul and that. So that was fantastic. So good stuff. Good stuff. We're in good company. You're in good company. Sean. We know somebody. Anyway, let's get cracking. So, Sean, we've invited you on. As you may know, we go out live. So this is live right now on where are we, Jaren? Where are we live?
We are live on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook page, a couple of Facebook groups, and YouTube. And the new one is Trovo Live this week that I just added.
So quite a few places, Sean. So what we might find that we get some questions coming in, whether they're directed at us, they might be directed at you, they might just be general conversation pieces. But we'll Jarian tries to sort of filter the questions from all those different places into our conversation. So as we're talking, if we get any questions that crop up and things that you might sort of go, that are directed at you, we might try and get an answer out of you. So just remember, guys, if you're on a platform that we can't tell who you are, then just drop your name just so we know who's listening. But Sean, thank you for coming on. Well, just introduce yourself briefly to us so that everybody that's listening knows who you are.
Okay, well, my name is Shawn Martinbrough. I'm an artist and a writer. I've been working in comics since the early 90s, actually. I worked for Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Valiant. I worked with Robert Kirkman for a long stint at Skybound on a series called Thief of Thieves. It did not involve zombies. It involved a master thief who loved to run around and steal things, and that was a really fun series. I'm a native New Yorker, but I live in the Washington, D.C. area now. And so I spend my time drawing, and now I'm actually writing more. So kind of balancing between writing stories that I'm working with talented artists, and I'm functioning as an artist on series that are written by other people, and also writing and drawing my own series.
Excellent. And so you've got quite a distinct style as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been told that my style is very noir. And for those who don't know, noir means black in French, but I love the dramatic shadow, chiaroscuro, very heavy shadows, very, stark black and white contrasts. I grew up reading people like Alex Toth, Frank Miller, later on Mike Mignola, David Mazzucchelli, and these are people that use a lot of strong shadows in their line work, which I love, and that just inspired me to sort of emulate that kind of style.
It's very graphic, isn't it? That, like you say, those hard lines, those hard sort of black lines against the white, the crisp white page, and it's quite striking sometimes, isn't it? Especially, I think it suits certain characters better than it suits other characters. Have you found that in your time?
To me, I feel like you could apply it to any character. It's just, but there are certain scenes when you draw them, if it's in broad daylight, it's kind of hard to find a shadow, although you can. But sometimes certain scenes will lend themselves to more shadows, and other scenes will lend themselves to less. So it's actually kind of interesting. I think I'm constantly trying to strike a balance between light and dark, black and white. So if there's a page that has less shadow, that creates a great contrast to a page that's heavily shadow. So it's all about finding the drama in a scene by using light and dark.
Yeah, nice. Speaking of light and dark, and just something relevant to Marvel and the MCU, and very, very very current. There was lots of I wouldn't say controversy, it wasn't controversy, but intrigue around people seeing Daredevil in the daylight in the last episode of She-Hulk.
There was controversy that created controversy.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was controversy. I wouldn't say it was controversy. That's probably the wrong word, but certainly people were like, Daredevil in the day. And it was, I must admit, I didn't even think about it until somebody said that. And I was like, actually, that's a good point. I don't think I've ever seen Daredevil in the day until that particular moment, which was quite interesting, actually. And when you go thinking back at it, and especially as, you know, like I said, at the time when that aired, I think I was about halfway through that Daredevil Netflix season. And I hadn't even seen him in the daylight. I mean, not even as Matt Murdock in the daylight. It was just everything was at night. Like he must be nocturnal. Alex, you want to say something?
No. I just feel like a lot of that has to do with like they're trying to convey that the show's dark, so everything always takes place like at night. Like he's always fighting somebody at night. You know, one of those types of situations. Like, maybe.
Yeah, I guess that it's lawyer by day, you know, vigilante by night, isn't it? I guess it's that kind of.
I'd have to go back to like the legendary Frank Miller, Klaus Janson run and say, okay, did he never draw Daredevil in the daytime? I mean, I'd have to go back and double check that, but you know, that totally did not even occur to me when I was watching it.
It didn't me either.
Yeah, I think people just had their notepads out while watching She-Hulk, watching She-Hulk, and they were like, okay, what am I going to complain about now? Got to complain about this. Got to complain about that, which I don't really get, but okay.
But I loved how they trolled people though in the show about the hate and the all the, you know, backlash towards the show with how it went and so forth.
Yeah,
I don't get it. It's so funny because I was talking about this with a friend of mine who was talking about, yeah, you know, I think that DC and Marvel should kind of reach out to some of these groups and engage them and see what they want, what they like, and what they don't like. And I was saying, you know what? I don't remember Marvel or DC reach out to me back in the 80s, the 90s, asking what I thought about what direction I thought they should go in. You know what I mean? Back in the day, before there was an internet, if you were so inclined, you would take the time to write a letter and mail it into Marvel and DC. And usually those are the whack jobs anyway. Those are people that are really kind of have a lot of time on their hands. And editorial would ignore those letters. You know, what really dictates how a book does is the sales. You know, so if the sales go up, then you're doing something right. If the sales go down, then you're not. That's it. But everyone now feels like they have a say-so in what this stuff is. And I'm like, you know, I don't listen. I see bad things all the time. I see a bad TV show. You know what I do? I don't watch it. I'll go to a bad restaurant. I'll say, you know what? That was a pretty crappy meal. I'm not going to go back there, and I move on. But people just really want to just sit and just complain and complain. I'm like, guys, really? Like, yeah, it's a bit much, but you know, what do
I think like you said there, people feel like they've got some sort of claim to this stuff,
Yeah,
and how
you
good
don't.
it should be or what it should be. And no, you're right. It's the artists. And when I say the artist, I don't just mean an artist.
No,
Like
it's better. Yeah.
the artist, like the director, the writer, those people,
Yeah.
on what they want to produce. And if you don't want to watch it, then that's fine. Like it doesn't have to speak
From the
to
channel.
And,
Yeah,
and here's the thing, like I can't think of a creative person that's ever set out to do something bad. You know, like there's no whoever said, I'm going to make a bad show or I'm going to make a bad comic book. Like this doesn't happen. Usually, you know, you try something and you can it either works or it doesn't, or you're really limited by the amount of time you have to produce it. You know, and that will dictate whether or not it was successful. But no one ever sets out to do something bad. And all these people that want to, you know, oh, that sucks and it sucks. It's like, okay, when you put your thing out, how are you going to feel when people just pounce on it and tear it apart and say, you suck. Listen, come on, you wouldn't like that. So come on, you know.
yeah, absolutely. I like the term that you just said there, hate watching.
It's like,
I just feel these people, like you said, with their notepads.
yeah, like, okay, it's Wednesday. Let me sit down in front of Netflix and really, or Disney Plus and be upset about She-Hulk. It's like, if the first 2 or 3 episodes didn't work for you, then that's it. Give it up. Watch something else. There's tons of other stuff to watch. You know.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So Martin, Sean, you've done a TED talk, haven't you, Sean?
Yes.
You've done a TED talk. I reckon I could just watch TED talks all day long, all day, just about anything. Doesn't matter what they're about. I could just watch TED talk. I don't think talking about whether something's good or bad or whatever. I don't think I've ever ever watched a bad TED talk. I love them. I absolutely love them. And I watched yours. Earlier this week when Jarian said that we'd got you on. And again, true to form, loved it. Loved every word of it. Something that was really prevalent in that talk was about representation. That was something that you said that, you know, you was changing opinions on what was who was represented, and it's something that I was really keen to talk to you about the whole idea, not necessarily just of race, but of gender as well, of sexual orientation, but this whole idea of not necessarily. I don't like to use the word swapping because. But just this representation, the whole sort of representation world, you know, obviously looking back at comics when they were first written, and a lot of these characters when they were first written, they were written by, you know, middle-aged white guys, and that was all it was. It was just straight white guys. That was it, you know. But now obviously the world is a lot different. And you know, I really enjoyed listening to your take on the whole representation side of things in your talk. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that and your experiences in the way that you changed things? I remember you saying was it the Robert Kirkman project that you was on? You said that you then drew this character as a black lady, and then Robert Kirkman went, "Oh, so she's black," and you was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, well, that you know, I think that when you grow up, you know, I'm a black kid from the Bronx, and I was a huge comic fan. And you just digest what you're given, and you're like, wow, you know what? I'm reading the Fantastic Four, reading the Thor, I'm reading Captain America or the Avengers, and as you get a little older, you kind of say, well, wait a minute, I don't really see characters that look like me. Now, of course, you had a couple of black characters here and there, but you start realizing, wait, everything is kind of being created through one particular lens. And, it really matters when you see yourself in a character, when you see yourself on a big screen, that it lets you know that I can do that too. And I feel like there's been this really hard push against diversity. It's almost like a pushback here. And people run around, oh my God, you're woke, you're woke, you're woke. And I'm like, okay, let's think about this. And I always think about one of my favorite movies of all time, which is The Matrix. I think that The Matrix is a perfect movie and it just works on so many different levels. But I always think back to when Morpheus is, when Morpheus is showing Neo the ropes, he's like, I can't explain to you what the Matrix is. And he's kind of walking and explaining, how it works and everything like that. And what he says is that when you kind of realize what the Matrix is and what's going on around you, and in a sense, waking up to seeing what's going on, you're going to realize there are going to be people that will fight tooth and nail to stay plugged into the Matrix. They don't want to wake up. And I always think about that with the woke thing, because let's think about the definition of woke. Woke means you're awake. So if you don't want to be with, you're like, oh, I'm anti-woke. So you're literally saying you want to stay awake. And as you get older, hopefully your mindset will expand. You'll say, okay, I'm seeing that things could be a little bit better. Things could be a little bit more even. Things might be, be shown through one lens. And I get it, back in like the 80s, or when I started reading comics in the 70s, the 80s, comic books were mostly produced by all white men. As you said, they were middle-aged white men and they lived in the suburbs. Now, comic books for Marvel and DC, they were based in New York City. They were based in Manhattan. That's where their offices were. And a lot of those people that worked there came in from the suburbs. Now, if you're a white guy living in the suburbs and all your friends are white and you went to all white schools, well, chances are what you create will be all white. Because you're not even thinking about a Pakistani guy. Like, you're not even thinking about a character that would look like that because you don't come in contact with that. So I can understand that. But hopefully as you expand your thinking, you expand your experiences, you say, you know what, there is value. There's value in like these different cultures, these different types of people. Think about some of like the greatest creators on the planet. Let's say like Michael Jackson or the Beatles. Those guys went off and like started traveling the world and started pulling from other cultures, other styles. And they like Madonna, they would take things from different places, put their spin on it, and it made it more interesting. So diversity and, it's not a bad thing. It's actually it inspires you as a creative person. So going back to your original point about representation is that as I got older, I said, wow, you know what? I'm not seeing characters that look like me in stories. And so if there's an opportunity for me to make a character of color or a female character, I'm going to do that. And I'll try to go against my programming. Cause even though I'm writing more characters. Sometimes I'll instinctively say, let me make this a male character. I'm like, well, wait, why am I doing that? Why am I just making this a male character? I can make it a female character, and that could give me more. That could sort of make things a little bit. That can mix things up. It can give me a different perspective, and ultimately, what makes a great story is having characters with different perspectives coming together, and that creates your conflict. If everybody is thinking the same way, there's no conflict.
Yep.
If everyone has the same experience, there's no conflict. And so, so going back to your point about the instance where I was working with Robert Kirkman, when we were first working on Thief of Thieves, which is the series that we created together, Robert said, okay, here are a bunch of characters. Like the lead guy is white, and he's got a wife, an ex-wife, and his son. I know they're white. And he also has a crew of thieves that he pulls heists with. And he just threw out a bunch of names. He didn't give me any descriptions for them. So I literally sat back and said, all right, let me kind of think about really different types of characters. So I had like an Asian character. I had like a Puerto Rican character. I had a black character. And then you had like the main nemesis to our lead character, Conrad. Her name was Elizabeth Cohen. And she was a female FBI agent. And I'm like, well, you know what? Let me make her black. And he didn't specify what she was. So I did a design and designed her as a black woman. And I sent it in, and he was like, oh, Elizabeth Cohen's black now. Cool. And just like that, I created a bit of representation. Now going forward, if it ever gets adapted or whatever, then that's like a living, breathing person that now represents a black female in that story. And it's really powerful because if a black female, comic book reader, if a black female comic book reader reads this, well, wow, that's really cool. Like I'm seeing myself in this work, and if someone who's not used to a black woman, they'll say, oh, okay, you know what? I see that she exists on the paper. So in my mind, I can see that she can exist in real life. And this might counter any prejudices or things I've been told about this person since I've never met them before. Like I've always said that television and film paved the way for Barack Obama becoming president. Because before then, we had never had a black president, obviously, but we had black presidents in media. We had black presidents in movie. You had Morgan Freeman playing the president in one of those movies. You had, I think there was like a black president in 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. And if people see in Reddit, and that's the power of representation, if people see that that's possible, then in real life, it's not so far-fetched.
Yeah.
And that's the power of media and art to sort of, open minds and, make people inform people's perspectives.
So the recent outrage right now is that people are casting Keke Palmer as Rogue for X-Men, and I don't think her identity, her race, has anything to do with Rogue at all. She could be anybody as long as she has that Southern Belle type of attitude. What are your thoughts on the whole Keke Palmer? Because she even did an interview for Nope, and she did the accent and everything, and it was spot on. If you've seen that video of her on the Nope interview.
And now listen, I grew up reading the X-Men, and of course, Rogue was always a white female character with the Southern accent. I get it. But people also have to realize, okay, now we're in a different medium. This is film, this is television. The X-Men have been done. Like they've been done in movies. So in our minds, what was the actress's name who played Rogue in the films?
Anna Paquin.
Anna Paquin.
Yeah.
So, okay, if Marvel now has the X-Men back. If they're going to make their stamp on it, you want to do something different. So that's why I think, there was the rumor where Giancarlo Esposito might play Professor X. Okay. And people are like, oh my God, that's terrible. It's terrible. But and even my buddy, who's a huge comic fan, I call him my civilian friend. He gives me perspective on, like just the average fanboy response. He's like, yeah, I don't know about that. I said, well, let's think about this. Patrick Stewart is so associated with Professor X that any other white guy you kind of plug into that, if he's an older white guy who's bald, they're going to be comparing him to Patrick Stewart. Mm-hmm. So how can you creatively, you want to kind of come at this from a different angle to throw people off to say, okay, this is something new. And that to me, I see the benefit of that. That's what they say what race swapping is. there's a business angle here. It's not just like, oh, we're taking something away from you. It's like we're trying to give you something different. We're trying to give you a different spin on something that you know so well. Because isn't that what you're paying for? Like, I don't know about you, but when I put down my hard-earned money to go see a movie, I want to be surprised.
Yeah.
I don't want to be able to predict the movie scene by scene by scene. You know what I mean? I want to be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And seeing a completely different take on characters that we know, I'm all for. Just make it good.
And that's how I feel about Namor in Wakanda Forever, because them casting Tenoch Huerta in the role is a genius move. You're bringing a whole other demographic that the MCU hasn't had before. There's no heavy Latino character in the MCU, really. Yes, we have Luis, we have Torres, but no major person like Namor like that. And so them doing that also, along with disassociating him from Aquaman and using the Central American region, they're doing a whole different spin on it, and it's a whole new surprising thing, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's like no one's realizing that, because I think when I was reading some of the information about the film, and they were saying how they're not calling it, he's not from Atlantis. It's a different name.
Yep, Telecon.
And then I realized, whoa, okay, because Atlantis has already been claimed by, Jason Momoa, his Aquaman franchise. They've already claimed that. So you can't do the same thing. I probably would say that. So I get why you would want to go in a completely different direction with this character, but at least stay true to his essence and stay true to like what we know of the character. I saw Black Adam, and I thought that Dr. Fate looked really great. Like, I really loved how they visualized the characters. I kind of wish that they'd given Dr. Fate some different type of powers, because doing multiple versions of himself, it's like we saw Doctor Strange do that already.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish that they would kind of sat down and say, okay, how can Dr. Fate use his powers in a different way? Because I thought he looked great. I thought that Pierce Brosnan was great. I just think that you got to differentiate these characters now. And now that DC is sort of trying to get back on their feet and they're trying to establish their movies, here's the thing. Everyone knows if you're a comic book fan, Marvel and DC have copied each other over the years. A lot of their characters are copies of each other. They're mirror images of each other. But now that we're getting into TV and film, they really have to work to differentiate that. So when I'm looking at these characters, I'm like, wow, okay, Atom Smasher, he looks really cool running around. He's big. However, you already have Ant-Man, who grows very big, and he's kind of goofy. He's kind of funny. So I don't know if you should have made Atom Smasher goofy and funny, because people are going to be thinking Ant-Man. You know what I mean? Same thing with like Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate, like, you kind of have this like regal kind of white guy playing, Kent. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, you kind of have a regal guy playing Doctor Strange. So maybe you kind of have to go in different directions. Like I said, give people something different, so they're not saying, oh, that looks too familiar, and they're comparing. That's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Go on, Alex. Go on.
I was just gonna say, I haven't seen Black Adam yet, but I'm hearing that there's a big end credit scene in that movie.
No way.
Worst kept secret on the planet.
Yeah. But yeah, so hopefully that'll kind of point to DC's movie franchise a little bit in a better direction.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things on what you said there, Martin, I just picked up on. Firstly, I knew that we'd be friends, and the fact that Matrix is one of your favorite movies of all time, brilliant, well done. Mine too.
Great movie.
Yeah, fantastic movie. I'm all up for that kind of that whole stick it to the man sort of anti-establishment type stuff. So I really enjoy that whole movie. And talking to that movie and just bringing it back, I've got a theme of tonight. I feel like I've got a theme in this session. Okay. I just watched is it in the penultimate episode, I believe, of the first season of Daredevil, when Karen Page he's taken actually by John Wesley, and that scene, he could be Hugo Weaving in The Matrix. Go and rewatch that scene. It is spooky how much he's like Hugo Weaving in The Matrix as Agent Smith. It's even some of the things that he says, and he says about him being inevitable and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I didn't realize it was very similar. But anyway, love that movie, and there's a good little connection that I noticed the other night. But more importantly, that was just a side note. You mentioned about the essence of a character being important, and being maintained, regardless of whether you swap their gender or race or sexual orientation or whatever it is. And I totally agree. I think that is vitally important. So is there any time where you feel that the race or the gender or the sexual orientation of a character shouldn't be tampered with? Are there any times where it's like, actually, no, this is vital? Could you pick out one or two characters across DC or Marvel and say, actually, this person needs to be, a gay white man, or he needs to be a black female? He needs to be a black female. She needs to be a black female. Do you know what I mean?
I might have some questions if they cast Brad Pitt as T'Challa,
Yes.
the Black Panther. That wouldn't really make a lot of sense to me.
The Ryan Gosling meme of T'Challa.
Yeah,
be floating around.
I think that kind of goes against the essence of the character. But then someone might say, "Oh, but what if you made Thor a black guy?" But we've established that there are black Asgardians with the casting of
Idris.
Idris Elba as Heimdall. Saying you can have there are tons of black Brits that could do that. So so that's not really crazy. For me, as a creative person, my mind is open. I try to keep my mind open. Of course, I'm a human being, so of course I have my little blind spots. But I just want you to surprise me. So if you come at me with something completely out of left field, I might be taken aback at first, but I'm like, okay, let me see what you're doing with that. Where are we going with this? And I'm going to be with you there. So if I see if you swap someone so crazy, like they were talking about doing a black Superman at one point, that Ridley Scott was, I'm sorry, not Ridley Scott. John Ridley was, I think John Ridley was going to write it, or I'm not sure. But I'm like, okay, a black Superman. And people are like, oh my God, no, you can't change Superman. I'm like, but Superman's been around for 50 years at least. Like, don't you want to see some switch ups of that character? I mean, okay, so yeah, that might be a little jarring for some people. Then you might want to check your own self in terms of why that's jarring. But I'm like, okay, where are we going with this? What new way can I look at Superman and say, okay, well, that'd be interesting seeing a black guy do it. Now, also what kind of worked against them with that one is that they didn't give Henry Cavill a chance, and Henry Cavill was a great Superman. He just didn't get a chance to sort of shine as Superman. So you kind of didn't give him his due, and now you're going to replace him with someone else, and don't put the black guy in there because you send the black guy up to fail right away. So that won't work there. That wouldn't work. But I just, like I said, as a creative, my mind is pretty much open. Let me see. You might throw me, but let me see where you're going with it, and then I'll make my decision after I watch the whole thing.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. That's a nice answer. So you've kind of abstained to answer, but in a really good way. Do you know what I mean? You've kind of got to, actually, I'm not going to answer it because I want to see what you can do for me first. And I kind of attribute it to, okay, let's say if you got a really crappy email from somebody, and you're really ready to respond. Like me, I would be like, but I've learned to stop. Okay, you could type out the email, but don't send it. Sit with it a minute, maybe 5 or 10, and you'll probably feel a little bit differently and say, you know what? I'm glad I didn't send that email. And that's the way I think about it with media, with entertainment stuff. Like, okay, I don't know about where you're going with this. Let me kind of sit with it. Let me think about it. And I might be like, okay, you know what? That worked. I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I think people are too quick, aren't they? Just to quickly turn the screw and sort of put their 2 pence worth in and just say, "Oh, I didn't like it," because it's different. I've been talking about that a lot this week, actually. I won't go into why I've been talking about, but not people not understanding things, and not knowing why something's happening.
No.
They're scared. It's the same. It's the same. We used to be scared of. Well, some people are still scared of thunder and lightning, but we all used to be scared of thunder and lightning because we thought it was the gods trying to punish us. And then when we know differently, once we get the information and we understand what's actually happening, lots of people are not scared.
No, but I agree. I agree with you. And I think you're right about part of it's fear, but also part of it is people wanting to be funny and they want to be the first one to comment. They want that attention of being the first one out the box to say something. You know what I mean? I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, when I was in elementary school or high school or junior high, sometimes you might be in the lunchroom and everyone's cracking jokes. And then someone might, maybe the fourth person might try to throw a joke in there. It's not funny. And then the whole room goes dead. And then again, turn to that person. These days, everyone wants to be funny. They want to be funny. They want to be clever. And it's like, dude, you might want to think twice, because if you took some time, because there've been a lot of times where I'll see something on Twitter and I'm like, oh my God, I want to comment. And then I'm like, whoa, wait, I totally didn't read that right.
Yeah, step back.
And I didn't understand that. And I almost sort of put my foot in my mouth by saying something without having all the information. I just think people really need to slow down with that.
I also like how you said you want to be surprised, show me something different. And, people always forget, it's like we're not taking everything from the pages as they are and putting them on screen, right?
Sure.
The pages are inspiration to kind of help you mold the story. But once it comes on the screen, they're going to fit that to, their larger story, their grand scheme of things. Kevin Feige's big board of how he wants the MCU phases to go. So I completely agree. Surprise us, show us something different. Don't show me a carbon copy of what we see on the pages. Also, too, a lot of that stuff, what you said, was written from a certain point of view, a certain time frame, and that's not going to have any other thing thought about to include.
I think some of the laziest journalism, whenever it just jumps out to me as lazy journalism whenever I see a critic say, "Oh, Marvel movies are all safe and they're all carbon copies. They don't take chances." And I'm like, "Are you insane?" Like Marvel, if you look at the end of every one of their movies, the status quo is not the same. Like they could have milked, they have upended things that they could have milked under any other studio system for at least 3 movies. You know what I mean? Like I was shocked when they got rid of Shield. They could have milked Shield for how many more movies? I was shocked when Iron Man revealed that he was Tony Stark. They could have milked that for a long time. Like they destroyed Asgard. I mean, like each one of their movies, like at the end of Black Panther, he's like, "Hey, we exist. Wakanda is." Like so. It's like what do you? How could you say that they don't take risks? Of course, there's certain formulaic parts of their movies, but overall, I give it to Marvel is that they keep us on our toes, with a lot of their movies, because they totally go against what we're expecting, which I think is why they're so successful.
I feel like if you went and watched Endgame, I know me going into Endgame, a lot of my thinking on that movie was who's going to die in this movie, and I kept on going in like, oh, it's not going to be Tony Stark, it's going to be Captain America who's going to die, like it's going to be, and then so at the end of that movie, I'm like, oh wow, Tony Stark just died, and Captain America like went off and lived life. Like my head was completely thrown for a loop, but I liked that it was the exact opposite of what I expected going into that movie.
Yeah, and these are characters that have generated billions of dollars at the box office. So under any other normal studio system, they'd be like, "Are you crazy? We're not getting rid of Iron Man." I mean, like, granted, listen, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is sitting on a bed of a mountain full of cash, so he's become expensive. But they would be like, "Why are we not on Iron Man 6 by now?"
Yeah.
I'm gonna come in here from the chat, and they agree too as well. Yes, show us something good and different, like Werewolf by Night, for example.
I haven't seen that yet. I hear good things, but I have not seen it yet.
Oh, it's great. It's
I
great.
was just about to say, I think it's a really good comment. That was Roxy there. Really great comment, because I was going to ask you what you thought of Werewolf by Night. Because, speaking of noir, do you know what? Actually, something that came up the other day, which I didn't actually realize, somebody that brought it to my attention. And Martin, I'll try not to spoil it for you, and I'll try and be vague with what I'm saying. So there's a moment at the end of the film, Alex and Joe, moment at the end of the special presentation. Alex and Joe know what I'm talking about, where it goes from black and white to color, and there's Somewhere Over the Rainbow is playing when that's on, and it's very much like Dorothy, and she's coming back from Oz.
You're saying too much. Get off of Werewolf by Night. Now I'm going to be waiting for the color to pop up. So,
Don't worry. You'll still be surprised. But
Yes.
I didn't even realize that happened, and it was only when somebody brought it up, I went, "Oh yeah, why didn't I spot that the first time round?" But fantastic little nod there. And the way that they did that was brilliant. But we won't talk any more about Werewolf by Night, Sean. We don't want to ruin it for you.
But let me know when you watch it, though, because I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, especially with your style of illustrations and how they do Werewolf by Night. So definitely keen to hear your opinion on it when you watch it.
That's exactly my point. Yeah,
I've been invested in Andor, so that's what I'm distracted on.
Andor, the last 2 episodes of Andor have been absolutely outstanding.
Listen, if you told me like the fact that I am loving the workplace drama in a Star Wars, which is, that's what I'm talking about with show me something new.
Yeah.
You know, that workplace drama was more interesting than any of the last like lightsaber duels and like the last
Yeah.
couple of movies, you know?
Yeah. That whole bit. Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet, so I plan to binge watch it when it's done. I just haven't had time.
Joan, so episodes 1 through 3, and they released 1 and 3, 1, 2, and 3 together for a reason, because it is quite slow burn in those first 3 episodes. Episode 4 kind of starts setting the stall a little bit, and once you get to, I mean, episode 6 is possibly one of the best episodes of anything that I've watched for a long time. Gripping, just absolutely incredible. And then episode 7, most of it's dialogue, but the dialogue is just beautiful. There's 2 or 3 moments of dialogue, and it's just gripping, absolutely gripping. It's just 2 people or 3, 4 people talking together, and you're just like the whole time, you know. It's really, really fantastic. I adore it. I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
How many episodes is it?
I think there's 12. So
Okay.
there's going to be 12. There's 7 so far,
nice.
I think.
Okay.
So, but that's one season. Then there's another season of 12 episodes that's coming out early next year. Mark's live. Mark, you're live, aren't you? I think you were live. You were live a minute ago. Mark, let us know how many episodes of Andor there is going to be. So, Shawn, just thinking about you and your style and the comics that you've illustrated. What if someone was going to adapt a story that you've illustrated for onto the screen? What sort of character do you think it would work for best? And would you like to be involved in a project that could be taken onto the big screen? And if so, how? Like, how would you envisage that going if, let's say, Marvel or DC, anybody came to you and said, Shawn, we really like this story, we're going to adapt this, we want your help?
Oh, well, I mean, I would love to be involved. I probably would say out of all my projects, the project that I had the most creative freedom on to create was Thief of Thieves with Robert Kirkman, because that was just creating a world from the ground up in terms of like the visuals, the characters, how they look, his mannerisms. I mean, so that's something that if they were to make an adaptation from, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm assuming I'm going to get a call that someone might care about my 2 cents, but yeah, that's probably the project I had the most creative freedom on. A lot of the other projects, well, actually, I'm trying to think. I mean, if I'm going back further, there was a miniseries that I did for Marvel called The Morlocks. Came out around 2002. It might have been one of Jeff Johns' first projects for in comics, and he wrote it. It was like a very, I don't think it really sold well. Barely any people really remember it, but it was awesome. It was about following like a group of mutants that lived in Chicago, and they were Morlocks, and I had a lot of creative freedom to do that. And so they were interesting, eclectic group of characters that would be great to see if they did something with them. My Luke Cage Noir series that I did for Marvel, it was Luke Cage reimagined in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance.
Oh, wow.
That would be an amazing kind of like mini series to see someone just do. I mean, and for that, I would just be curious. Hey, I think I laid it out on that in terms of how it looks. Let me see what someone does with it. Like, that'd be really interesting to see.
That would make an interesting what if episode.
Yeah. Instantly, I could imagine it straight away. As soon as you said it, I was like, I'm seeing it instantly. Yeah, that
if DC were to rip off, the MCU, and because the MCU they have the ability to do that with something like What If, but if DC were to kind of like do an Elseworlds kind of jump off for television, no, wait, no, Elseworlds is still DC.
Yeah, What If is Marvel.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, Marvel could do it. They could do a What If, like the Noir series in the What If kind of vein. They could do that. That would be very interesting. Actually, there's a the Hellboy. The 2 stories that I did featured a Black character named Woody, which would be fun to see actually Woody palling around with Hellboy in real life or in animation. That would be great to see. So yeah, those are a couple projects that might work.
Nice.
On the Andor confirmation, looks like Mark says 12 for the first season, all taking over the time of 1 year. 12 for the second season, taking place over 4 years. Every
wow.
3 episodes will be a year leading to the events of Rogue One, which that's
Oh,
still
wow.
one of my favorite Vader scenes is Rogue One.
Yeah, Rogue One is great. That gets better with time. That's like wine. That movie gets better with time.
Yeah, we was talking about that today. Actually, I was talking about Ben Mendelsohn in that movie. Just saying how absolute class that man is. And I didn't realize until about a week ago that he was in the film Vertical Limit. But it was. Have you ever seen that movie where they climb?
Yeah. Wait, was that the one with Charlie Sheen jumping out the plane?
No.
Wait.
What's that? No, Vertical Limit is with what's the guy's name that played?
Where he saves his sister.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Ben Mendelsohn was in that movie.
Yeah, Ben Mendelsohn was in that movie, right? He's one of the brothers. Like he's like the stoner climber.
Okay,
he gets blown up. That is exactly the attitude I had, Joe. And when I saw him, I was like,
I didn't remember him. Yeah,
no, watch it again, and he's in that movie. But anyway, Ben Mendelsohn, brilliant actor, and in Rogue One, fantastic. But I've lost my train of thought. Vertical Limit is hilarious. Who said that? Yeah, Mark. Go back, Mark. Go back, Mark. Watch it and find Ben Mendelsohn. But yes, it is hilarious. There was something else I was meaning to ask you. Oh yes, that's right. So this one might take us up to the end of the episode, but
well, we're not constrained to an hour if Sean's not. So
no, that's very true. And something we're keen on talking about, and something that's very even more current, as about as current as you could possibly be in the MCU right now. What are your thoughts around recasting T'Challa?
Yes, I was asked this question recently, and I feel like once again, this is one of those situations where people that are so outspoken kind of need to take a pause and think about the big picture. I mean, they were just about to start filming this thing. They were about to go into pre-production on this when he died. So, what do you do? And I think that the Black Panther made such a cultural impact around the world that any Black male actor that stepped into that role so soon would be compared to him.
Yep.
I can't, to be honest, I really can't think of a Black actor of his same age with that kind of gravitas to overcome people comparing him to Chadwick. I can't. And so I understand Marvel saying, yeah, we can't really recast him now. And maybe they might change that in the future. But I think it was too soon. And once again, I'm curious to see how they deal with it. I mean, they're a class act. So I see that, they're going to, pay the proper attention to him. But I think that eventually they'll probably recast him. I mean, but I think right now, I think it would have been really distracting to do that. And I can't think of a known Black male actor in his age range that could overcome all of the scrutiny and the comparisons to Chadwick Boseman. It's too soon.
Yeah, I also think too that Ryan Coogler had a big influence, because the more I read about it, it's just that he couldn't do it. He's like, I couldn't do it for this movie. And the more I read about his interviews and just the cast talking about it, he couldn't do it so soon. And I think that played a huge role on how Marvel's handling this.
Yeah, and I just think that when people are like, oh my God, he should have recast. Like, I mean, come on, like, it's not like we knew he was dying for a long time, but we can kind of wrap our brain around it. That was just some out of left field news that he died. So, and that was that last year? Because I mean, time is all screwed up now because of everything. But was that
the last two? I think with the last 2 years. Yeah,
just over 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was just so I don't fault them for doing what they're doing.
I mean, yeah, you're right. It was a lot to feel. We saw that one picture of him sick, or not sick, but everyone's like, "What's going on with Chadwick?" That one picture, he looked really frail, and then a few months later, the news came out that what was going on with him. So,
and also, here's the thing: like, his presence goes beyond one movie. Like, they had him in Civil War, they had him in Black Panther, and he was also in Infinity War. So, like people have been seeing him multiple times in that role. So I think it's just hard for that. It's just too soon for that. Yeah.
That's why
Go on, Joe.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. That's why I think there's going to be I'm still going with my theory. There's going to be a child. They're not showing a lot of Nakia in the previews. It's like you barely see her. You
told me this theory.
Yeah. I still think there's going to be a child, and that's how they're going to do it. There's 2 Wakanda series they have for Disney Plus. One about the Dora Milaje, and one unnamed. I think it's going to be like a Young King series. I can completely see it happening.
See, I try not to do that. I try not to try to guess as to what's coming unless something is so obvious that I'm like, okay, I can't help but see that. Okay, when you're walking to the house, the killer is behind the door with the big axe. Like that's just very obvious. So unless something's very planned out for me, I'd really try not to speculate. I really try.
I try
It's all we ever do.
Yeah. But my thing with this whole thing is like with Marvel, at first they were saying like, I think it was it Brad, what's his name, came out and said, no, we're never going to recast T'Challa, early on. But then more recently they're saying, well, Kevin Feige and Coogler saying, well, right now's not the time to recast T'Challa, kind of leave the door open for later on. That's why I'm saying they could transition that and still kind of, pay respects and not have to recast him if there was a child. That's where I'm coming from.
The conclusion that I've kind of come to after all of this, and I must admit, hands up, I was in the kind of the camp of, recast him. I was, but I can look back on those faults that I had then and say that now I've got different faults, and I feel like I was wrong back then. There's no more time. There's no time after this movie to tell a Chadwick Boseman story. This is it. If we're going to tell a Chadwick Boseman story, if we're going to pay homage to Chadwick Boseman, I say we. If Marvel are going to pay homage to Chadwick Boseman, this movie is it. They can't recast T'Challa and then pay homage to Chadwick Boseman in like the next movie. That won't work. It has to be done now. So there's no more time for Chadwick Boseman stories. However, there's plenty more time for T'Challa stories.
Sure. Yeah.
So T'Challa can come back in another way, in another form, later on down the line when time has done its job of healing and easing that burden that you speak about, Shawn, of another actor stepping into those shoes that Chadwick left behind. So yeah, that's my views on it now at this stage. However, one thing I would like to sort of bring up, and I think that you'll appreciate this, especially based on what you were saying earlier on in the episode. And these aren't my words; these are. So I guess he's kind of, I suppose, a special guest host. I suppose he's been on our show a few times now. He's a member of the group, Monty Harry, good guy. Something that he was saying a long time ago about this whole sort of recast T'Challa and whether we will see T'Challa again was again around representation. And he was saying that when he was growing up reading comics, same as you, he saw, lots of white people. He saw the occasional sort of black guy here and there, Falcon or Luke Cage, but they all tend to be sort of like from Harlem or the Bronx, they've come from nothing. And all of a sudden you've got T'Challa, who's a king. He's mega rich. He's super respected. Everyone loves him. He's got this sort of nation, this army, all the resources. And it's like all of a sudden, you're not just represented by a guy from Harlem. You're represented by a king of a nation who's got everything at his fingertips. And he's just an amazing king person, And like you said, I could be that guy, and it opens up that whole kind of conversation around the representation, not just necessarily being representing you, but someone from your neighborhood, but actually representing something larger than, something that you could be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you see images, if the only images you see of yourself are negative images, well, how do you think that's going to make you feel? And what do you think that's going to make you think about your potential? If you look at a lot of movies in the 70s, I mean, like black folks, and not even the 70s, you just keep going, post slavery. Like, there were just so many like dehumanizing depictions of black folks over the years. And you can't tell me that as a white person, if you're seeing this, if you don't know any black people and all you see are criminals or buffoons or servants or minstrels, well, how do you think you're going to perceive black people when you meet one in the, finally, when you finally meet a black person? And that's why, when you have groups now sort of saying, hey, we're tired of sort of either not being shown or being shown in a negative light. And hey, if you don't know people of this persuasion, then hire people, give people a chance to write and direct those stories about themselves. You know what I mean? And that's the big thing. I think, what a lot of white folks need to realize is that equality doesn't mean that someone's taking something away from you. You know what I mean? No one's taking something away from you. We're just saying, hey, treat everyone the way you're being treated. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's it. And I've to me, one of the most progressive movies that I think everyone sleeps on is Die Hard. Die Hard is there are 4 different types of black men featured in Die Hard. You have the cop,
Yep.
you have the tech guy, the nerdy tech guy,
Yeah.
you have the really cocky FBI guy,
Yeah.
and then there's
The limo driver.
the limo driver, Argyle.
Yeah.
What other movie? Think about it. That's 4 different types of black men represented, and no one's making a big deal about it, but it just is.
Yeah.
And to me, like, I'm like, you could have the black guy be the villain, but don't make him be the only black guy in the movie. That's a villain. Give me some balance there. You know?
That cracks me up. The FBI agent. Are they both called Thompson or Johnson?
Johnson.
Agent Johnson. And he goes, "We're not
No
related."
Well, relation. I mean, and they're all distinct. They're all distinct and different. You know what I mean? Which is great. You got the nerdy tech guy who's like, ha ha ha, like the quarterback is toast. You know, like you got that. You got Argyle who's kind of wisecracking and stuff like that. And then you got Reginald Bell Johnson playing the father, the cop, who's just kind of grounded and who's really sort of being like the emotional anchor for Bruce Willis's character. You know, but Die Hard is to me like, I'm like, that is such a progressive movie. It's ridiculous.
Oh wow! I'm gonna next time. I did know that obviously, but now I watch that movie the next time, I'm gonna watch it in a complete different light. I think something else I really enjoyed as well, talking about representation and this breaking down these kind of stereotypes and these visions that we've got. I watched it a while ago. Me and my son watched it because I said, "Watch this." I said, "You'll really like this." It was A Time to Kill.
Oh,
with Matthew McConaughey and Samuel Jackson and all of that. And I really enjoyed it. What are you laughing about, Joe?
Nothing. Go ahead.
No, I just really like that movie and that his whole speech at the end of that about when he says about, he talks through the whole crime and then he just says, and now imagine she's white. And because everyone was imagining that it was the little girl that it was happening to. And then all of a sudden he just puts that image in their heads and then they all just kind of go, oh yeah, like we weren't thinking about that.
Yeah, and I can imagine why Jerry is probably laughing because it's like a white savior kind of structure. But you know what? If it gets the message across, I'll take it. I'll take that. You know what I mean? Can that be refined a bit? Could there be some more nuance there? Sure. But the more movies we have like that, I'm not mad at it. I get it. But that was a really great speech, though. That was a great speech.
Yeah. And like I say, I think the thing that reason I brought that up is because, like you said about imagining that image that you're seeing in your head of yourself or of somebody else. If you're always seeing somebody in a certain light, then that's how you're going to always see them, and that's what I think that's what made me think about it. Because in that speech, they were all seeing what they thought they were seeing until he put a little nugget in their mind to change,
woke them up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No.
So, Alex, you were having some conversation before we came on. You were kind of quiet. So, do you want to talk about any of Shawn's work that you were talking about before we went live?
Yeah. So we were actually talking about like Red Hood and stuff earlier, and I know you worked on Red Hood, and you actually brought something up earlier about like people writing in and sending in like messages and things like that and letters. But I wanted to bring up, because I actually thought this was funny. I remember back, I think there was at one point in time that Jason Todd thing where you could call in and you could do the, choose what happens to Jason Todd or whatever in DC Comics. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I personally, like, I've always thought that was a really interesting thing, but I know that you've done some work with Jason Todd as a character with Red Hood and everything like that. So I wanted to kind of see what your thoughts were on that character and working on Red Hood.
It's funny because when the Bat Office reached out to me and they said, hey, listen, we're interested in, are you available to write and draw a two-part sort of a two-part story for the Red Hood, because we kind of have a space in between our next event, which at that time was Future State. That was their big crossover or whatever event. And so I said, well, listen, I'm busy drawing something else, but I'm available to write. So they said, oh, sure. So I pitched them a story, and I had no idea who the Red Hood was. Mm-hmm. And then when they said, oh, but that's Jason Todd and he was killed by the Joker, and I thought about that, that comic book that you were talking about, how back in the 80s, it was, and I remember it because it had a great Mike Mignola cover where Jason Todd's like, his Robin, he's dressed as Robin, there's blood on his face, and it was like, you can choose whether or not he lives or dies. And I remember that because I was like, that's kind of hardcore. And I think people voted for him to die.
Mm.
And so then I just started doing some research because, when I decided to take the job, I was like, all right, let me kind of do some research in terms of to see who Red Hood is. And I was, read a bunch of books, and I looked at some of those animated series, and I was like, wow, okay, this is who he is. This is an interesting character. And it's tricky because as a writer, I can't really make any major changes with Jason within 2 issues.
Mhm.
Issues. But I can try to expose him, or I could try to maybe show a different side of him by using supporting characters around him. And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of place him in a new environment, because I think he had been gone from Gotham, but he was coming back to Gotham for like these two issues. And I thought it'd be interesting to put him in a new environment with new characters. And I thought about this story that I illustrated back in 1999 called Batman the Hill. It was written by Christopher Priest, and it was all about this really neglected section of Gotham City called the Hill. And this was like the black section, but and this is Christopher Priest had written a whole more nuanced 12-part series that unfortunately got cut down to 40 pages. You can imagine, he wasn't happy about that. But I always thought that was a really interesting idea, because in that story, what we did was the Hill they didn't believe in Batman. They thought he was just some white guy in a cape. He never came to the Hill. And so they really had this sort of really harsh, critical eye towards Batman. And I thought that was a really interesting story. Now, as far as I know, that DC had never done anything with the Hill since. And so I said, that'd be an interesting location to see, well, what's going on with the Hill 20 years later? Because if you think of any bad neighborhood or any rough neighborhood over time, and Andy and I were just talking about Shoreditch in London, which was kind of rough, and now it's a very hot, trendy place because that's prime real estate. And so I said, you know what, that'd be interesting to apply that same thinking to the Hill, because minutes from downtown, come on, what are we doing here? And so that was the whole premise of the Hill. But then there was a crime element there. There were people that were kind of jostling for power. And then sticking Jason in the middle of this was interesting, because that kind of I kind of used an old Western approach where you have the hero guy kind of riding into this small town, and there's some beef going on in the town that he's got to kind of settle or get caught up in, and help them kind of figure out a solution. And that was like the premise of going to the Hill. And it allowed me to introduce a bunch of different, diverse characters with different perspectives, different motivations, and then throwing Jason Todd in there and seeing how he navigates it. And I thought it was a really fun 2-part story, and it was really, really, really well received.
That's awesome. And you worked on Detective Comics as well, right?
Yes, way back in the 2000, the millennium, DC was doing a creative change on all of the titles, and they approached me to draw Detective Comics. And I worked on that for about 2 years with Greg Rucka, who is an amazing writer, and he's written a ton of great stuff. And so that was a really fun time. And so it's kind of trippy to kind of go back and be playing in the Batman Gotham City sandbox 20 years later with the Red Hood story.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a lore that's constantly being built on. You don't want to step on anything because of Gotham is just like constantly growing. It seems like, Gotham is just endless.
A funny thing with that is that I made the mistake of actually trying to establish how old Jason Todd was. And then fans got, they were like, wait a minute, wait, you thought he was this, but with this, then I was like, you know what, but in real life, Jason is 50 years old? Like, how old is Batman? How old is Bruce Wayne? I mean, Bruce Wayne is like, an 80-year-old character? And that's like the challenge of continuity and trying to sort of keep things a certain way. Because honestly, like, how old is Bruce Wayne? I thought he would be in his 40s or maybe 50s, but even that seems kind of off.
Yeah,
So-
they're still young. I was going to say, is it like Bart Simpson? Bart Simpson should be about 55 by now.
Yeah,
And
how old are these characters in real life? So that's what makes it kind of challenging to sort of keep continuity in mind when you're writing these things,
And I feel like a lot of people were questioning that with the future state stuff, because I feel like the future state stuff with DC was kind of like shaking up a lot of the mantles and stuff, like changing, because we've had these characters that have held these mantles for 70, 80 years. Like, you know, Clark Kent's always been Superman, Bruce Wayne's always been Batman. So like, let's slide some new people into these roles, kind of type of thing. And you know, I've seen some people complain about that, but I think that goes on with what you're saying about give us something new, give us something different, be a little bit different, you know?
And that's the challenge, because, you know, fans, you know, they want something different, but then when you give them something different, do they buy it?
They motivate it.
You know, they're like, oh my God, that's different. That's different. Or, and this is, I was actually having this debate with another friend about the whole race swapping thing. I was like, okay, well, you've had characters change hands over the years. You know, like Beta Ray Bill stole Thor's hammer, and that was a horse guy. You know, you've had different people become Thor, you know, at some point. And I think that, but so it's always easier for a company like Marvel or DC to change an existing character to get a couple of more sales out of it, to kind of try something different. Because if they came out with a completely original character, then no one would buy it. You know, it's like, well, what is that? I don't know what that is. But if you take something that's familiar, like Superman, and then make him a green alien for like 20 issues, well, people say, well, all right, I know what Superman is. Let me see what this green alien Superman thing is. So I think at the same time, you have to be willing to try something different. If you're willing to buy something different, they'll give you something different. You know, that's why they reboot TV shows, because people say, all right, well, I remember the original version of that. So it's not completely brand new, you know, versus something completely new. And people might say, well, what is that? I don't know. But, you know, then that comes down to marketing and how well is it positioned.
I guess that's why they often tie a brand new character to an existing character, don't they? So Miss Marvel, for example, you know, they've kind of gone, well, we've got Miss Marvel, we've got Kamala Khan. Let's tie her to, you know, Carol Danvers. We've got Kate Bishop. Let's tie her to Clint Barton, you know?
Riri, Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Tom Holland, Tony Stark. I mean, but then that's not even new. You know, think about it, because back in the 80s, you would have a successful TV show like Different Strokes, and then you'd have like some older white lady show up who's running a girls' school, and you're like, what's this? And then that was the spinoff. That was Facts of Life. You had like George Jefferson, part of All in the Family, and that was the setup for his spinoff. So old school TV, this is not new, you know, but it works, because if you're kind of introducing something new with something established, then people are willing to give that something new, I guess, more of a chance to see what that's about. And that's a lot of what I'm doing with these Red Hood stories, introducing new characters.
That's the entire Dick Wolf universe, you know, Law and Order SVU, Chicago PD, they're all interconnected at times. They cross over. So
yeah. I was just going to say the DMZ thing, that's something that was in DC that I was kind of surprised was a part of the DC universe when I found that out, because DMZ is kind of like a weird.
Well, it's not actually. DMZ came out of Vertigo, which was Vertigo was the more adult line of comics that DC Comics put out. But Vertigo existed in a separate plane. Like Sandman was part of Vertigo, but Sandman never interacted with DCU proper. So DMZ was part of Vertigo, so that they never part of that universe. Although now they might kind of try to blend it, but typically they weren't. You know, so you're never going to see like a Sandman Superman story. They were
Cool. I just want to pick up just a couple of things. I really like what you said about the Western style. You know, somebody going into a sort of a broken down town and sort of, you know, fixing a couple of problems in the town, or, you know, kicking out the baddies. You know, I really like that idea of bringing that into a world, like you said there with Jason Todd going into the Hill. Was it called the Hill? Yeah, I really like that idea. I never thought about that before as a template for a story, you know, and now you've got me thinking about it. Actually, yeah, that is exactly what used to happen. You know, the cowboy used to roll into a small town and they've got a gang problem and he'd clear them out, you know, shooter and all of that kind of stuff.
It was, like, I think, you know, as a writer, you know, because I've been fortunate I got my start in comics as an artist, but I always wanted to write. and I've worked with some really talented writers, Greg Rucka, Jeff Johns, Andy Diggle, um, uh, Mike Benson, Adam Glass, and I know I'm forgetting some people here, but so many different writers. Oh, Nick Spencer, uh, and so I've actually, it's almost like a writing course, getting their scripts and translating that, as the artist and seeing how they'll lay out a story, how they'll approach a story, how, they'll pace a story. And plus I'm a huge TV and film buff. So whenever I watch film and TV, I'm always studying how they lay something out. And so that device of the Western, that was an interesting device to use for this Red Hood story. Because like you said, this is a guy coming in from out of town and the town has problems. And so he's got to he gets caught up in the town's problems and he helps them solve the problems and then he rides out of town.
Beautiful. I'm going to carry on asking you questions. I'll come back to another one in a minute, but the one that just come up there, the idea that I heard that Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, what they sometimes did, Stan Lee got so busy in the end that he wouldn't actually write stories. The artist, he would commission writers to actually artists to just fill panels, and then he'd write the story to the panel. And I find that really interesting, because what the writers, the artists were basically writing the story visually, and then he was just putting words in the to the pictures that they're drawn. I find that, does that still happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, that happens sometimes. I've heard various stories about how much Stan wrote it's on certain projects. Over the course of my career, I've always gotten full scripts from the artists, from the writers. Some writers, and I've heard horror stories from fellow artists about writers that just overwrite. And that's one of the advantages that I have being a artist who is now writing, because I think I have a very good understanding of pacing. And I also understand that in a comic book form, comic books are visual. The story is telling at least 60% of the information for you, so you don't have to write as much. If you get a writer coming from television or from novels, they're going to overwrite because that's what it's just all about the words. And they have the room to do a whole Aaron Sorkin monologue. In comics, you really don't, and so if you understand that you don't have to write as much, the visuals are going to be telling so much of the information that it allows you to be more nuanced. You can cut. And I think that for me, one of the interesting parts of the writing process is cutting. Like I'll lay out whole scenes and then just chop them down to what I need to say. What needs to be said here? Is this communicated in the art? And will the audience pick it up? Because people aren't stupid. The readers are very savvy. They've been reading comics, all their lives. So they can almost sort of see where you're going. So if you kind of suggest something, the brain will fill it in, which trace to my style, because I like more impressionist artists that don't draw every single nut and bolt. Listen, I love Jeff Darrow. Jeff Darrow's an amazing artist. He draws every single thing in a frame. But I like artists that are more subtle, like Alex Toth. Alex Toth had a great saying, which is always draw what you have to.
Yeah.
And what I find is that, almost like an impressionist painting, impressionists wouldn't draw every single eyelash, but they kind of give you like a suggestion. And I think it forces your brain to fill in the gaps. And if you apply that to writing, that if I say something, I don't have to spell out, hey, I'm going to the store to buy some food.
That's what a lot of old comics used to do, though, isn't it? They used to do that. They used to literally explain, here's Iron Man with his repulsors, and they blast, and you're like, oh, come on.
And old television shows, old movies were written that way. And then over the years, the dialogue has gotten a lot more sophisticated, where sometimes there's shows that you're literally jumping into a conversation in progress, and they're not slowing down to get you up to speed. You have to really sit and focus to catch what they're saying. And I think that sometimes that could be a little challenging. Like if you take a show like Endor, you have to really pay attention to what's being said, because they're speaking in nuance, and they're also speaking, sometimes with layered speech. So they're saying one thing but doing another. And I think that actually it requires more attention from the reader or the viewer, but I think it gives a more satisfying experience when you're consuming it. And that's what I try to do as a writer. So going back to your original point about, Stan Lee maybe just blocking out a scene, and then Jack Kirby would draw it, and then Stan would look at the art and say, okay, I'm going to fill in the gaps of what I need to. That happens sometimes. But for me, I've been always fortunate to have writers that write a full scene. And, like, I think the writer that I've worked the longest with consistently is Andy Diggle. And Andy Diggle has written Green Arrow and The Losers and somebody, 007. He's written a lot of great stuff. And I think one of the things I really loved about Andy's writing is that he was so sparse. He wrote what he needed to write, but he also trusted me as the artist that I could visualize the story, so he didn't have to give me a whole lot of stage direction. He could just say, "Car speeding down the road." I know that I would kind of apply that. I would make that. I would make it look interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Why say 100 words when 10 will do?
Yes.
Yep.
From the chat comments here, one of my favorite single issue comics is Immortal Hulk King in Black tie-in. There's no words. The pictures tell the story.
Oh,
I haven't seen that, but that makes me think about a classic comic book, which is the G.I. Joe Silent Snake Eyes issue.
mm-hmm.
It's called Silent Interlude, and that was written by Larry Hama, and there were no words throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest issues ever done. And that I actually paid homage to that in the first part of my 2-part Red Hood story, where there's a scene where Jason Todd is sitting on his rooftop, and there's just no dialogue. It's just he's overlooking like a busy street. All you hear are the honking of the car horns.
Yeah. I tell you, is it Avengers 49? It's in the Kang Dynasty at some point, and it's when Wasp basically signs over America to Kang, but that's a silent issue. It's fantastic. He's absolutely brilliant. And I tell you what, the only thing that I can relate it to is if I whispered like this, you'd have to really listen. So when you take the words out of something, you have to really look, and you read that story through the pictures, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And that really tells. And then all of a sudden, that's when an artist is making their money, when they can sell a story. Wally. There's like no words in Wally for about 35 minutes, and it is absolutely glorious. It is brilliant. The first half an hour of that movie is some of the best cinema I've ever seen in my life, and there's no words. There's like one word. She says Wally, and he says Eve. That's it. It's brilliant.
You know what? You weren't expecting that. It was something completely different that you weren't expecting, and you're like, "Wow, okay." That just makes it so much better.
Yeah, definitely. No, and that's in that whole Kang run, that Kang Dynasty run. You're reading the story, you still read, and all of a sudden you're like, "Where's the words gone?" And then you're like, "Oh, hold on, I get it." And then you're reading it, and you're like, "Well, what?" Looking at it, and you go, "Yeah, I can see what's happening." You really, you feel it,
Yeah.
One last thing that I was going to bring up, and this is still in my notes, was Alex, you brought up about did you say there was an issue where write in and tell them what happens to Jake?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Has anybody seen Bandersnatch on Netflix?
I think I've seen parts of that. That was like was that one of those shows they changed it? Yeah.
I heard about it. I didn't see
Black
it.
Mirror.
Yeah. It's by Charlie Brooker. Yeah, who done Black Mirror. Yeah, it was supposed to be one Black Mirror episode, but it was just too long. But I've watched it. Well, I've only watched it once, but I've finished it 3 times because you can. I think there's like 7 different endings. But wow. You choose your own endings, and you do it all through the remote control. So you do it all through your control, and you have a conversation with the main character at one point. And you're like, "What's going on? This is insane!" But it's really really clever. It's like an adventure. Basically, he's writing a computer game in the 80s about based on an adventure book where you choose your own ending. The whole movie is that, but very clever, very clever. I enjoyed it, but it was frustrating at the same time.
I will re-add that. I'll add that to my list because I was like, I think I totally forgot about it until you reminded me of it. I was like, yeah, that was one of those I wanted to check out. But then there's just an avalanche of new content coming out like every 5 seconds. So
it's hard to keep up.
It is. Alex, Shawn, have you got any more questions for Shawn?
No more questions, but Shawn's got some recent things out here. So a month. Oh, go ahead. You want to say something, Shawn?
Oh, wait. Did we answer all the chat? Are there any chat questions that haven't been answered?
No more chat questions. They're kind of quiet today, which is unusual.
Yeah,
I think everyone's just listening. But yeah, so Shawn has recent things come out. He did the art for Black Panther Wakanda Atlas, which has been out for a month now.
Yep.
And then you also have your show from Brother Man to Batman. You want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah. Okay. So starting with what you just referenced, it was the Black Panther Wakanda Atlas, which is really cool from DK Publishing. They dropped it's a nice big size book, which kind of takes you inside the world of Wakanda. I did 3 pieces of concept art for it, which are really awesome. I did like the marketplace. I designed the Wakanda embassy, and I visualized the vibranium mines, which is really cool with amazing colors by my buddy Adriano Lucas. That's really awesome. And then the show that you just mentioned is called From the Artist Experience from Brother Man to Batman. This is in New York City. So if anybody's in New York City, there's 1 week left of this. It opened in June, and it's an exhibition featuring Black comic artists ranging from the independent to the mainstream, hence the title From Brother Man, which was one of the, a hugely popular independent comic book called Brother Man to Batman, which is, huge. And we feature a really great group of artists for this opening exhibit. And not only do you see their artwork, but we also interviewed each one of them and asked them about their creative process. So we asked them, hey, how do you start your day? What time do you go to bed? How do you get over creative blocks? What do you do for inspiration? And it's really a great window into each one of these different artists in terms of their creative process. So we have Afua Richardson, Kari Randolph, Sanford Green, John Jennings, Daryl Banks, Jamal Eigel, Ron Wimberly, Larry Stroman, Micheline Hess, and so many more. There are many more, but it's a really great exhibit that I'm really proud of that I co-curated with Kara Mahorn, aka the Blurred Girl, and she also has a book called the what is it? It's on the Dora Milaje. It's like explaining. Yes, it's a great book. So pick that up.
And then I know when we met and we were talking, you were talking about possibly having that show possibly come to another city and anything like that. And that's still in the works, or?
Well, we're actually going to do a part 2 at the Society of Illustrators. We've already started talking about doing that. But yes, it would be great to sort of take the show around. So if there are any museums or galleries that would be interested in this, please feel free to reach out, because I think it's an amazing group of artists that we're looking to, just let everybody know about as, if we can.
I really like the way that it wasn't just simply about the art, but it was about their process as well. And it was like a look inside. It was almost like a day in the life of an artist. And you sort of getting to know the artist a little bit more, like you say, about their creative process and what they do when they reach a barrier. The type of things that they can challenge themselves with just to get over that next.
I get questions like that all the time. People say, "Hey, how late do you work? When do you work? How do you exercise? What time do you start your day? What time do you end how late do you work? How do you get over creative blocks? What do you do for inspiration?" And so I thought that since I get those questions all the time as an artist, it'd be amazing just to sort of interview all of these artists. And I know a lot of them as friends, but it was also interesting to hear their creative processes and what they do. And I thought it was fascinating just me learning this as a curator. So I think people really were responding to that.
Yeah, and you're only going to inspire a new generation of artists as well doing that, because you're going to help them, aren't you?
Yep, totally. And that's representation. When you see someone else doing what it is that you want to do, or being or in a position that you want to get in, it just, when you see yourself in them, you say, "Hey, I can do this too."
You know what? You can tell you've done a TED Talk because you've just wrapped that up. Like, beautiful. Beautiful. I love the way you brought that back round. That was fantastic.
But you know what? One last thing I have to plug.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm very proud of this. It's a new children's book series that I did called Judge Kim. This is all about, it's illustrated. It was created by 3 buddies, Milo Stone, Joe Illidge, and Christopher Jordan, who did all the artwork. And it's an amazing story about a little girl who, her mom's a judge, and there's some beef in the neighborhood. And she says to the kids, whoa, don't fight. Let's kind of settle this. Let's go to my treehouse, and I'll be the judge, and present your cases to me, and I'll figure out how to solve the problem. And so this just came out from Simon & Schuster. We're really, really proud of it. So, it's definitely like a great book to teach kids and their families about the law and how to solve problems in a calm, empathetic way.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
I think we'd all be better off reading a lot more children's
Yeah.
so many of them do that, and I've never noticed it before until you read them as an adult, until you're not reading them to a kid anymore, and you're like, hold on a minute, these are really good messages. So fantastic, that's brilliant work.
A couple chats here or comments from the chat real quick. So about the like a chat today. Someone goes, awesome guest today. I'm listening intently. Another one says, same, it's so good. So we've enjoyed having you on, Shawn. Anytime you want to come back, you're always welcome. So anything you want to chat with us, we're always willing to have a nice conversation and chat about whatever. So
awesome, guys. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks everybody for sticking around and listening, and be safe and be creative, and keep that open mind, and, look to be surprised,
Love that. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Shawn. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Why don't you tell them about the time we faced?
All right. Well, as